answers. I wish you very good luck with your proposals.
Thanks, Natasha, and thanks, Claudia. So good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here and to be sharing with you and the University of Coimbra some tips and knowledge on how I feel that things that you need to do in order to be successful with MarieCurie postdoctoral fellowships. This session is most important thing to bear in mind is that I would like to try and keep the session as informal and casual as possible. We have 2 hours before lunch. We have lunch, then we have another 2 hours. I've got content myself. I can talk for that period of time, but please, if you have any questions about what I'm speaking about, or any specific questions yourselves, or even if you want to share bits from your proposal that you would like some feedback on, then please feel free to interrupt me at any point. Additionally, following today's session, if you'd like to reach out to me individually to get any additional feedback, or set up a separate meeting just to get some feedback on your proposal or any of the refinements and the things that I've said, then please feel free to do so. Just before I start, just a little bit about me. So I've been working in the field of European research and innovation for about 20 years. I was previously head of European research and innovation at University College London, UCL. And pre-Brexit, we were one of the top universities in Europe at securing MarieCurie funding, and we would regularly win somewhere between 30 to 50 MarieCurie fellowships per year, and we were consistently ranked as one of the top universities in this space. I'm an evaluator for MarieCurie and a proposal writer, and I've also helped dozens of people outside of UCL to secure funding. I help a lot of people in widening countries, particularly. So that's one of my areas that of specialism, where I help fellows who are looking, who maybe don't have the national or regional support and expertise when it comes to MarieCurie funding and Horizon 2020, Horizon Europe funding. I give them training and support, a little bit like what I'm doing today, to help them to review, refine, and hopefully secure MarieCurie funding. So now I'm I'm a CEO and co-founder at an organization called Crowd Helix, and Crowd Helix is a network and a platform that basically connects research organizations and businesses in order to collaborate. And what I'm going to do first is, for the first 5 or 10 minutes, is just to give you a brief overview of Crowd Helix, not just because, but also one of the things that you may want to consider as a MarieCurie fellow is in an area of your application, and something I would strongly recommend you looking at including in your application if it fits, is the option of secondments. And what we have at Crowd Helix is a very big network of organizations, so 600 plus organizations, 400 plus businesses, 150 plus research organizations. And my offer to you is that if you're looking for an organization to do a secondment in that complements the work that you're doing in your MarieCurie fellowship, then please, and you can't find, you're looking for an organization, then please let me know, and we will try to work with you through Crowd Helix to find a potential organization for you to do your secondment at, which you can then write into your application. So I'll start with some slides now, if that's okay, and then we can then go through today's session. I'll just share my screen. I can't see my screen. Can I just have a feedback just to confirm that you can see this?
Yes,
yeah.
Perfectly.
Okay, so just a bit of information about Crowd Helix. So as I said, we're an organization we're a network and a technology platform that profiles and connects researchers and businesses. The idea behind it is to try and make it easier to profile and connect people with expertise across different disciplines, sectors, and regions to collaborate together. Our main entry point focus area is international research and innovation programs, and that being Horizon Europe. But we also do other forms of partnership building. And as I said just a few moments ago, one of the areas that we would quite easily help you with potentially is to find an organization to do a secondment in for your MarieCurie proposal. I won't share too much information on actually what we all about, because today's focus is obviously on MarieCurie, but here's just a snapshot of the research technology organization members of Crowd Helix. So we have about 160 members from all over Europe and beyond Europe. I think we have 54 different countries who are members with who are members where we have an RTO member based. And here are some multinational companies who are members, and we have about 400 plus SMEs. And what I would suggest doing is, if you're interested in looking for a place to do a short stay or a secondment for your MarieCurie fellowship, then please let me know, and we can post this on our technology platform. So this is our platform here. We can post it in the respective helix. So the way the network is structured is around clusters, which we call helixes. These are virtual communities, and then we can post this requirement for you looking for a potential partner to do a secondment or a short stay with, and we can post it on our platform, and then we can use the team at Crowd Helix to help to facilitate that for you and hopefully find you an organization if that's of interest. So I won't share too much now on Crowd Helix. These slides will be shared afterwards, and you'll have the standard information on Crowd Helix. But if there's anything where you're looking for partners, please, whether it's for secondments or international networking, then please feel free to use Crowd Helix. As I said, University of Coimbra is a member of Crowd Helix, so please feel free to use that network and platform as you see fit. Okay, so what we can do now is move on to the main point of discussion today, which is about MarieCurie and writing a successful postdoctoral fellowship. And what we're going to do is break down today's session into 4 parts. So the first sort of 45 minutes or so of today's session will be looking at section 1, which is looking at the excellence section of the proposal, going into each of the subsections and how you should address each of these, and also some tips around the best way to frame a proposal, really. I think a lot of people, when they write the application, the most important piece of advice I can say is at the very beginning is approaching the proposal with the right mindset. And I think so many applicants I see, when they apply initially, approach it from the wrong angle. They approach it from a research heavy or an academic heavy angle. And MarieCurie fellowships is not about academic. Its primary focus is not about academic excellence in terms of writing a heavy academic paper or a heavy academic proposal. It's about career development, learning new skills, training, knowledge transfer, and that's the bigger picture. And this is the whole essence of what MarieCurie is all about. And I'll talk to you in a bit about how best to approach that. And then what we'll do is then have a break, just a comfort break for 5-10 minutes, and we'll come back and then we'll talk about impact and how best to approach the impact side of the proposal. Again, this is an area that some of the academics particularly find, researchers find quite challenging, especially around areas around exploitation and dissemination, and also trying to quantify the impacts that are being brought out from the research that they're doing, like the bigger picture impacts. And I'll give some tips and ideas on how to do that. And also I'll showcase to you some examples of best practice of how some applicants have done this and have received full marks. Then we'll have a break for an hour for lunch, and then this afternoon we'll come back and we'll talk about implementation, which is basically the management side of the project, how you can design the project in terms of work packages, risks, deliverables and tasks, and then also there's the areas around. There's an area under the management section which is about the capacity of your organization as well. And then we'll have a short break then, and then come back and do the final section, which will be around looking at like the part B2, which is basically the non-technical part of the application, the submission of the proposal, making sure that you've got all of the right forms correctly completed, like ethics and gender and things like that. So again, please feel free to interrupt me as you see fit whilst I go through this section. Very happy to answer questions whilst I'm presenting during and of course after today's session. So if we look at this first session, which is the excellence session, what we've got here in the proposal is it's called section 1, excellence, and it's broken down into 4 parts essentially. You've got section 1.1, 1.2, 1.3 and 1.4, and then you'll have subsections within these areas which we'll go through individually. And before I go into these subsections, what I want to talk to you about is making sure that you understand what the requirements are when applying for MarieCurie. But before we do that, I just want to share with you some information, some important documents which I think you'll need to all look at if you have not already done so. So before writing an application or whilst you're doing so, you should look at these documents here, which I've highlighted. So you really need to look at the Guide for Applicants and the Work Programme. These are online and these are part of the European Commission's website under the MarieCurie Directorate. I've linked in here a tiny URL for you to look at, and you can use this after today's call, but you really need to read these documents whilst, or ideally before, writing your proposal. Something I would really recommend anyone doing before they start writing is to have a look at some previously funded proposals, ideally in your domain area. I don't know what your policy is at Coimbra, if you're able to share any previously funded MarieCurie proposals, or if there's confidentiality requirements around that. If there is anyone here today who would like to have a look at some successful applications from MarieCurie in confidence, then they can contact me directly and I would be happy to share them with you. I have a file of previously funded proposals from applicants who I've supported who have given their permission for me to share these with future applicants on the basis that it's not shared widely beyond the applicant themselves. So if this is something that is of interest to you, then please feel free to get in contact with me directly and I'll be happy to share those that application with you. The other point here, which is obvious, but you know, it is obviously incredibly important, which is to register your proposal early. By doing so, once you register your proposal in the portal, it provides you with the standard template, and then you can start to complete your proposal and start to write it out accordingly. I would say, typically speaking, to do a MarieCurie fellowship without it being too rushed, it takes between maybe 2 to 3 months of preparation. I would say typically around about 5 to 10 revisions of it, maybe a little bit more depending on the type, what condition the proposal is in to begin with. The point of what I'm trying to make is that you won't be able to, it's highly unlikely that you'll be able to prepare a proposal with 1 or 2 drafts and submit it, and for it to be successful, you need to give yourself time to write, refine, polish, and do that cycle over and over again to almost produce the perfect application. So something I'll go through later, which is the success rates for MarieCurie. So success rates are low, around about 8 to 10%, something like that. The score that you need in order to get funded is around about 92%. So what that means is that there's very, very little room for any leeway or mistakes when writing your proposal. It has to be a perfect application, and you have to basically, please excuse the cliche, you have to tick all the boxes, and you will only be able to do that by doing a number of revisions, refinements, and really polishing the proposal to what you would consider to be a perfect application. And you cannot do this in a few weeks. Or you really, I mean, very rarely, but it will take 6, 8, 10 weeks to do this, and 5 to 10 refinements with the proposal from my experience. And then when doing this proposal, when you're having it prepared, please involve your supervisor, get them to read the proposal, give you feedback on the technical content, ideally get an evaluator from the MarieCurie pool of evaluators. If you have any internally at Coimbra, or people like myself, we'll be happy to give feedback on the proposal. And then also it's important to have the proposal looks like aesthetically nice, so it's presented and polished in a professional way, and obviously proofread, and so it flows from an English and language perspective. And I know these are very basic things, like obvious things, but they really do make a difference when putting in an application, and especially if you're looking essentially for full marks. There's no room for any significant error, because if there is, then chances are you're not going to be funded. I've also listed at the bottom here a resource which is useful. It's called Net for Mobility and Mobility Plus. This is a network of organisations that have produced, of national contact points that have produced useful packs on advice and guidance around applying for all the MarieCurie actions. So this is something that you may want to look at if you want additional insights on how MarieCurie is framed and what the expectations are, in addition to today's support, and obviously the support that you receive from your research office and your facilitators at Coimbra as well. So if we look at the evaluation criteria for MarieCurie, it's broken down into 3 parts. You've got excellence, which is the first part, 50%. Then you have impact, which is 30%, and implementation, which is essentially the management, which is 20%. And what I would do is, when writing the application, you need to make sure that you allocate enough attention, appropriate attention, to each of these sections. One of the downfalls that I see from people when they apply is that the application form for MarieCurie is set at 10 pages, so that's the maximum limit. And you'll see the first draft from an applicant where their section 1 is 7, 8 pages, or even 9. I've seen somewhere they're 9 pages long. So if you spend 80% of your content on a section that represents 50% of the mark, and you only have 20% of your content left for 50% of the mark, you're just not going to be funded. It's obvious you're not going to get funded. So you have to weight the amount of content and attention that you allocate to each of your sections according to the percentage of the marks that are allocated. Having said, you could say 50% for excellence. So that would be 5, half of the application template, which would be 5 pages. But I think a typical or a good indicator for writing the proposal would be, I'd say, 6 pages for section 1, and then 2 pages for section 2, and then 2 pages, or a page and a half to 2 pages for section 3. I call it the 6 plus 2 plus 2 rule. And if you can keep to that roughly, you won't go too far wrong. But one of the biggest downfalls that I see from applicants, particularly from academia, is they spend all their attention and focus on the idea, on the work packages, on the methodology, and then they give very little attention to all of the other areas where you get marks for things like about the knowledge transfer, the appropriateness of the supervision, to demonstrate how you'll become independent from the proposal. So just bear this in mind when you're writing the proposal, and try to keep to that sort of 6 plus 2 plus 2 rule. And then also approaching your proposal with the correct mindset. This is incredibly important to be successful with MarieCurie. And before you even start writing your proposal, this is probably out of today, this is probably my most important message to give to all of you, is that when people apply for MarieCurie, some people, they apply for it in the way that they would apply for a national or regional fellowship program, or for a fellowship program like the European Research Council, where the proposal criteria and the approach is academic heavy, and it's all about the idea and the excellence around the idea. And of course, academics, a lot of them, researchers, a lot of their focus is on publications, and the approach to the MarieCurie application is one of which that looks very much like a publication, very technically heavy, lots and lots and lots of references. All of the focus is on the idea and the research. And this approach will not, I repeat, will not get you funded. You have to approach MarieCurie from the perspective of that it's about career development, and it's about training and building up skills for the next generation of researchers. So that means building up skills in research, in a research environment, in a university, but also outside of a university, in different disciplines as well, different sectors, different regions. And it's not about the idea entirely. It's, I'd say, about 20% idea focused, 80% everything else. And the challenge that we have with many of the applicants when they apply is that they approach it from the other way around. They think it's 80% about the idea. I have to have an excellent idea, and it's all about the idea. But it's not. It's you still have to start with a novel concept and something that is genuinely innovative. But it's only 20% of the mark. 80% of the mark comes from all of the other cross-cutting items, which I'll talk through throughout today. So approaching your proposal with the correct mindset is absolutely critical. Thinking about how this project is going to transform your career. So whether that's in academia or outside of academia. And that's really, really important. Does anyone have any questions on this before I move on to the next slide? No? Okay.
Actually, Michael, there are a few questions on the chat box.
Okay, I cannot see them, so please feel free to.
Right. So we have a question regarding supervision, for instance. Does the supervisor need to hold a specific professional contractual position? Thank you. But this is not exactly the point that we're talking about in career development.
Yes, ideally they would be a member of staff at the organization that you're at, and if it's seen that they're not a member of staff, I mean, you probably wouldn't want to flag that anyway, because that would be seen as a risk. But if they're not a member of staff, if they're not linked to the organization, the evaluators will say this is a risk. What happens if this person leaves the organization, for example, or is no longer contracted to the organization? How would they be able to guarantee the supervision and mentorship required for the fellow? So it would be seen as a risk, and it would be something that I would avoid doing for sure. But if you had to do it, I wouldn't mention it, to be honest with you, in the application, because why would you mention something like that? Because you're just highlighting a potential negative. But the ideal approach would be to have somebody, obviously, with a contract at the organization who's fully integrated into the organization, that will provide you with the sustainable coaching and mentoring that you need.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Was there any other questions?
The other question is one of the applicants asking where to read previous successful proposals. And so I think that you can provide that.
Yes. So if you would like to email me separately, and I'd be happy to, if you let me know your domain, which area you're working in, then I'll be happy to share with you a proposal that's been funded where the fellow has given their approval for me to share these with potential applicants, on the basis that it's not then widely disseminated. It's solely for the applicants, for new applicants applying.
Yes.
Can I still ask one other question? And instead of typing, I'll just ask by live. So regarding this topic of career development, mostly career development versus idea, and this idea of developing a career that it's both inside academia and outside of academia, those two things are very valuable in this program. But the line between building specific only an academic career or not in this context may be hard to define. So could you provide some examples of successful applications and people that have successfully completed this program or applied for it that included this? Where my question, what I'm trying to figure out right now is, where do you draw the line between this is a good fit or this is just specifically just an academic focused proposal and not perhaps a good fit for this program?
So you will not lose marks if you have just solely academic outputs, let's say, but you will gain marks for having multidisciplinary approach, multi-sectoral approaches, showing how your work and your networks is going beyond academia. You'll get additional marks. So part of what I do with the applicants when they apply is they'll have a very much a solid academic application, and it's then trying to find those bits those little bits in addition, like a secondment, for example, with an SME, like working with mentioning sort of any networks or associations that are linked to your research work that are outside academia that you propose to target and work with. It's these additional things that will get you more marks. You can still work within academia, and to be fair, I would say most of the fellows that receive MarieCurie funding do continue to work in academia. What the scheme is trying to do is pushing the academic sector to think outside of just academia and push fellows to build networks and contacts, both as at organizational level, but also at the individual level, that will help to develop their own career. So you won't lose marks for it, but you will gain marks for having these additional things in your application, which, to be honest, sometimes you may not even fully maximize. As an applicant, you may not actually be that fully committed to or interested in. You may not even fully decide when the proposal was funded to do the secondment because things have changed, and that's fine. But I think for the purpose of actually securing the funding and getting the highest possible score, my advice always to applicants is to try and put in all of these bits that will just top up the mark, so that you can get the highest possible mark. And as I said earlier, you need to get over 90% to get funded. So if you have a proposal, if you have an applicant that's just doing solely in academia, and all of their networks are in academia, and the dissemination and communication and exploitation of their work is in academia, and that's, but then you compare that to a researcher that's going to be doing academia and business, or maybe academia and policy, or with academia and government, doing a secondment in a business, working with international networks to showcase the work that they are doing. They're going to get more marks ultimately, because it shows, because of the knowledge transfer, because of the exposure that they will have as a researcher beyond their academic communities. And that applicant will almost certainly get a higher mark. So it's up to, obviously, the applicants to put down what they want to do, but if they want to get funded and they want to get the highest possible mark, I would always try to consider having some form of networks or contacts written into the proposal that are outside of academia if possible. So it doesn't have to always be commercial. It can be, policy. It can be, if it's social sciences and certain, it could be museums, charities. It could be NGOs. I mean, if any of you here today have any problems in trying to understand how best to do this, or would like some tips around this on a personal level, then please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be very happy to share this with you and show you some specific examples related to some specific cases if you want to understand what your particular case is. Is that okay?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for your answer. I guess it's also really helpful to think not only what I need to put into this application, but what is expected from the reviewer. What are they expecting to see that will highlight and give those marks? And your answer also reminded me that it's perhaps more about making a point of extending your fields and pushing the envelope of the academic field, or creating a little bit of a newer path in some way, very much to the same extent that MarieCurie did. So thank you for your
it's exactly that. They want to see knowledge transferred beyond academia, the evaluators do, and this is one of the main criteria underpinning MarieCurie, and that should help to, always accelerate and enhance the career development of the fellow. It will help to broaden their horizons, their skills, their networks, their employability. I mean, this is a really big thing that underpins MarieCurie as well. They want to make sure that researchers who post PhD that are doing further research are employable beyond academia as well, and that the knowledge that's being created, the very valuable knowledge that's being created in universities, is being pushed out and being used by society. Okay.
Yeah.
Was there any other questions at this stage?
No, Michael, we can proceed.
Okay. All right, cool. So as I said, roughly speaking, the application is about 80% career development, about yourself, your advancement, and 20% about the idea. And I think one of the downfalls that I see so many times when applicants first approach the proposal is they think it's the other way around. They think it's all about the idea and maybe 20% about their career development. If you apply for European Research Council funding, ERC, it is the other way around. It is all about the idea, really. But I'm sure with national and regional funding, fellowship funding, it is like that as well. But with MarieCurie, it's a training grant. It's a training and development, career development grant. And I think it's really, really important to always bear that in mind, and not to focus too heavily on the idea and the concept, although of course that is very important in itself. Here I've just highlighted some things to bear in mind when we're talking about training. These are all parts of the application, and I'll go through these a little bit later. But training through research, making sure that your career, you have objectives that are linked to your career advancement. One of the things that the Commission now expect you to have as a deliverable at the beginning of your project is a career development plan. This is a new requirement under Horizon Europe, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Obviously, to develop and significantly widen the competences of the researcher, transferable skills, intersectoral experience, public engagement, quality of the supervision. All of these things are run through the subtasks of the proposal template, and which I'll go through a little bit later. But the point I'm trying to make is that all of these are linked to training. They're not really linked to academic or research excellence. It's all about training the researcher. And I think it's really, really important to always bear that in mind. It's a training and career development grant. It's not an academic excellence fellowship. So this is stuff I've already touched on. Just to give you, again, just to reiterate the how you should split the proportion of each section. Section 1, I would normally try to keep at about 6 pages. Quite often, applicants find that quite difficult. I would say 7, absolute maximum, but it's a bit risky. But definitely no more than 7 of section 1. But ideally 6.5 pages for section 1, with 2 pages for impact, and then 2 pages for implementation as well. And then, so starting to design your project, and I always, when you're doing this for MarieCurie, I'd say always think of it like when you're trying to build a house or an end product. Try to think of it like what is going to be the end. So when you're first starting to design your proposal, start to think of it and think, what is going to be my end goal? What am I creating? And something I would really try and avoid doing is saying, I'm going to be just researching an area. I'm going to be investigating this area, and I don't really know what I'm going to find out. this will not work with MarieCurie. It has to be a bit more clear. You have to have a vision on what the outputs and objectives are going to be. And this is quite difficult for researchers, because researchers quite often are researching, right? They have a methodology and they're going through things, and sometimes they don't know what the outcomes will be. But for MarieCurie, you have to almost stay at the very beginning, which I'll go through in a moment, where you're looking at the objectives and the state of the art, what the challenges are, what the needs are, and what you're going to create to respond to that. What are you going to build? So you have to have a very clear idea and vision in your proposal of what that looks like at the very beginning. And I'll talk about objectives in a moment. So objectives come at the very beginning of section 1.1, and one of the main downfalls I see with applicants when they write proposals is that they're unable to write clear objectives. So objectives, you would normally have about 3 to 5 objectives at the very beginning of your proposal. And these 3 to 5 objectives are clear endpoints, like products or deliverables of what you're producing. They're not, oh, I'm going to look into and investigate, or I'm going to look into and research. This is not an objective. That's a methodology. An objective is an endpoint or a goal. And of those 3 or 5 collective objectives, you're going to create different rooms. So I visualize it as a house. You can do it differently. Obviously, different rooms, different inputs that will then contribute towards the creation of your house or your project. So try to think, when you start to design your proposal at the very beginning, what am I building? What am I solving? What am I producing? And I would say to applicants, which is quite difficult for people to do, but try to productize your work. Try to think of it in terms of what are you creating as a solution that is going to be where there is a need. And I'll talk a bit about this in a moment. So to dig into each subsection of section 1, as I mentioned, we have these 4 areas, section 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. It's worth 51. Section 1 is worth 50% of the mark. I recommend that you spend about 6 pages on section 1. I would say section 1.1, which we're going to look at first, I would recommend spending about 1.5 pages on, roughly. And this section is really looking at 2 points. It's looking at something called writing your objectives. So these are the clear outputs, deliverables that you're going to produce. And it's talking about the state of the art of the work that you're actually doing. And state of the art, what that means is you have to demonstrate that what is currently out there at the moment and what you are doing is beyond what is currently out there at the moment. So that's what state of the art when it comes to Horizon Europe means. So you have to demonstrate and reference, ideally. I would always recommend using references when talking about state of the art, to back up and justify your comments, and then say what you are going to do in your proposal, how that will advance the research field. Okay, so you need to highlight in this section all the inter and multidisciplinary aspects, and then I would normally finish off the section at the bottom to personalize it, to say basically how this project will literally transform your career and collaboration opportunities as a fellow. How will it open up new disciplines? Maybe how it will enable you to become a leading scholar or a leading player in this new emerging field, and perhaps move on to be one of the top scholars or researchers in this area, in the European research area. So I would normally spend about 1.5 pages on this section, talking about the introduction. What you need to do at the beginning is explain why the project is important, what is the need and impact, and please link this to the EU's policies if you can. So if you look at the EU's Green Deal, obviously the UN Sustainable Development Goals. If you're doing a project that are anyway linked to any of these, then please make reference to these. What I would normally do, the first part of the introduction when you start off, is you're trying to sort of set the scene, sort of paint a picture at a very high level. What is the challenge that you're addressing? What is the need out there? And normally about a paragraph on this I would spend just explaining where the challenges are and what the problems and how this links to what the EU's priorities and policies are as well. And then once you've outlined this narrative of the challenge and the need, then you would then start to introduce your idea. And by doing that, you will be talking about first what is currently out there addressing these problems. What is the current basically what is the current state of the art? And then you would say after this, and and when you do talk about the current state of the art, I would try and reference these points at the bottom of that page, not at the end of the document. Although you can do it that way, but I've always preferred it at the. I'd make it easier for the evaluator to references by putting the footnotes at the bottom of that page. And then you start to then introduce your proposed idea and saying how is your proposal going beyond state of the art. And when writing your proposal, please, my recommendation is to signpost these keywords. What is the current state of the art. Have it in bold, and then have some text underneath it explaining what the current state of the art is. And then after that, have it in bold, going beyond state of the art or something along those lines, and then have an introduction to your idea, your innovation, and then you build on that. Another way of doing this, which I've seen from applicants that is equally effective and actually perhaps a bit more better at using space, is you could do this almost as a table format as well. So you could have a table on one side, you could have on the left-hand side, what is the current state of the art, and you could have a number of points. And then on the right-hand side of the table, you could say going beyond state of the art, and then showing exactly how your project proposal is going beyond the state of the art for each of those points. So it depends on what style you would prefer, but both of those are useful. The only point that I would make when writing a proposal in dense text is to really make sure you signpost the keywords of evaluation. So state of the art, going beyond state of the art, I would have these in bold. Having your objectives, again, I would have these in bold, making these clear bullet points. I'll also share with you in a moment an example of how this has been done by a recent successful applicant. When writing clear, before I move on, does anyone have any questions? Just checking. Nope. Okay. So writing clear objectives. As I've mentioned, these are endpoints that you are going to produce as an outcome of your project. They're not processes or methods or doing research. So doing research in your project, investigating something is not an objective. What are you going to create at the end of your project? And each of you'll have different blocks of creation, if you look at the house, different rooms that you're creating that will form the end product. And then you have to list each of these as endpoints, and these objectives at a very high level will form the driver of your project. And then underneath your objectives, you will have ideally work packages, and those work packages will then ideally link to each of those objectives. So there's a flow through the work packages to the objectives, and then underneath the work packages you will have tasks and deliverables and so on, and I'll go through this in a moment. But at very high level, objectives are endpoints. They're outputs of what you're creating. These can be created during the project or at the end of the project. You can have objectives that can be delivered. They don't always have to be at the end. So I've just set here some examples of some objectives, which which we can look at. So set up a virtual community. This is one here for intellectuals. The objective is to conduct in consultation with an intellectual ethnography by obtaining their accounts. And I have one here as well, some example. This is an applicant who scored basically full marks from last year's proposal. They decided to present their objectives in a table format. So on the left-hand side here, you'll see the objectives. And what she's done is she's linked each objective to a respective work package, which is great. And she has each objective listed going down on the left-hand side. And what she has decided to do, which was a requirement under Horizon 2020, not Horizon Europe, when you were writing section 1, was you had to list how your proposal was going to be original, how your objectives were going to be original and innovative. And she had decided to keep this aspect in. And on the right hand side, she's basically saying how this is original and innovative. And by doing so, she's obviously saying how this is state of the art. So down the left hand side, she has a list of each work package. And then also she has a link, a reference in brackets to how long each objective will take to deliver. And then later on in the proposal under section 3, there will be an overview of the work packages in the Gantt chart and the work package table, and this will link to these objectives as well. Does anyone have any questions on writing objectives or writing state of the art?
Michael, we just have one question, but it's regarding references. We have a question. How many references maximum would you recommend?
Yeah, I wouldn't put in loads. Obviously, I wouldn't, there isn't like a maximum or a minimum. Most of the references that I would suggest having in are going to be under section 1.1, which is basically talking about state of the art. So this is where you have to substantiate what you're doing, what is currently state of the art, and what you're doing is beyond that. And for that, to be fair, you have to have a number of references in, and I would normally do that at the bottom of that page, not at the end of the document, so that it makes it easier for the evaluator to cross-reference. But the number of references can be anywhere from 5, 10 up to sort of 20, 30. But just bear in mind, the more references that you have in, the more it will eat into your page limit. Even though it's smaller text at footnote level, it's still eating into your overall page limit, which is 10 pages. So I normally maybe 10, 20 references would be on average, but most of these would be in and around the state of the art section. Okay.
Can I pose a question?
Sure.
Can you please repeat which criterion was that you mentioned that was compulsory in H2020, but is no longer compulsory and was represented on the table?
Yeah. So if you look, let me just see if I can you see my cursor? Yeah.
Yes.
So
Yep.
This section here, originality and innovative aspects, this was actually part of the question within the proposal template under Horizon 2020.
Okay.
And has since been removed, but the applicant has used this because it references by having originality and innovative aspects in there. It's almost you're saying how your objectives are state of the art as well. So it's quite a clever way of doing it. And as I said, this applicant, I think she scored about 98%. It's one of the highest marks I've ever seen for MarieCurie. But yeah, it's the evaluators obviously liked it, and this is one way of doing it. And what's cool about it is that you've got the objective, you've got the link to the work package. So there's you've got a link to how long each will take. How is it going to be verified or validated? It's basically novel about it. So it's a very cool way of doing it, and she's done that for each of her objectives throughout, linking, referencing the work packages. So this is one way of doing it, and it's quite an effective way. Okay.
Can I just have a quick question regarding references? How important or how relevant it would be if we could link the state of the art with references that were actually produced either by the supervisor or even the applicant?
Yeah, that's fine, of course. No problem at all. That's good to support that what you're doing has been
My question is
by
do
previous work.
actually the evaluators notice or look for something like this? If it is the actual supervisor, for instance, that is actually advancing the state of the art of this particular field.
Yes. So you're saying the current state of the art is the supervisor that the applicant is going to? Is that the question? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. If this is actually valorized within the application.
Yeah. There will be references within the application, like footnotes, but that would be it. There's no expectation of the evaluators to then go outside of the application to check and cross-reference. Some may want to do that, but I doubt many do, to be honest, just because of the sheer numbers that the evaluators are required to review, and also it's not a requirement for the evaluation. If the evaluators were told you have to do this, then I'm sure they would do it. But the advice is that they don't have to go beyond what is stipulated in the application. So hyperlinks, for example, references, they're not required to be checked upon.
Yeah, but for instance, remarking during the text that whatever aspect of the state of the art which we or the laboratory developed or pioneered or something like that, that would be actually a plus?
Yes.
You're looking for, right?
Yes, but then you'd have to demonstrate how are you going beyond that. So what is already out there, and if you have created that or your supervisor has created that, that's great. But how is your proposal, this new proposal, then going beyond the state of the art? That's the key. You have to demonstrate that it's an advancement.
Okay.
Yeah, and normally an advancement would be, working with a supervisor that is new, working in an organization or a department that provides different skills, infrastructures, capabilities, working in a different discipline, working in a different sector, or all of these, right? But doing a sheer continuation of what has already been created with no additional added respectfully value, that it would be difficult it would be picked up by the evaluator. So how is this going beyond the current state of the art? So you need to think what additional value would this proposal be doing beyond what is currently out there? Okay, is there any other questions?
No, thank you. Please proceed.
Okay. So one aspect of the proposal that you really have to think about is how your application is interdisciplinary. This is a big deal for being successful with MarieCurie. I've seen most of the proposals that get funded, they are in some way multidisciplinary and ideally working across different sectors as well. But I think when it comes to social scientists, I've seen a lot of the proposals, if they're a social scientist and they're working in their area of research and they're continuing to work in that area of research, then there is a chance that they will be funded. But the social scientists proposals that I see getting funded are the ones that will then, for example, be working in areas outside of SSH, for example, computer scientists or technologists or policy agents or whoever. So I think what you need to do is really make the case and make it clear through bold text as well, how your proposal is interdisciplinary and or multidisciplinary as well. So section 1.1 is about a page and a half. It's looking at the objectives and state of the art. And at the very beginning, setting the scene. How you present your objectives this is an example here that we've showcased. Then you move on to section 1.2, which is basically your methodology, where you're talking about the project, how you're going to implement it. And there are some cross-cutting areas here as well, which are things like around gender and open science and research data. Here, this is probably this section involves the largest amount of text normally. So this would normally be around about 2.5 pages long.
Sorry, Michael, we're still seeing your interdisciplinary slide. I don't know if it's got.
Has it moved now?
No.
That's a bit weird.
Oh, there it is. Oh, yeah. 1.2. Soundness. Yeah.
Yes. Oh,
sorry
thank you.
to interrupt.
No. Please, please do if it's not popping up. So yeah, this is the methodology section. It should be about 2.5 pages, 3 pages long. It's where you're basically talking through what you're going to do in your project. My tip for people doing this is talk about your project in blocks. So each work package. So you'll have typically maybe 4 or 5 technical work packages. And then this section, the start of it, you'll have 4 or 5 paragraphs, each basically giving an overview of each work package and what you're going to do, how you're going to do it, what the expected outcomes are for each of those work packages. And then what I would do also when designing your work packages, and this is something that quite a few applicants miss when they first draft their proposal, is to seriously consider having some non-technical work packages included in the design of their project. So as I said, you might have 3 to 5 technical work packages linked to the research work that you're doing. And I would have 2 to 3 non-technical work packages included as well. And the non-technical work packages I would have included are things like, I think project management is something that you should always have in your project, because they will always require some form of management. I think training, remember these are training grants, so training should be a constant in my view, and there should be some clear tasks or goals for your training throughout, and something else around impact, whatever that is. If you're doing if you're developing a product, you're bringing something potentially to market that could be commercialized, then I would have maybe one on innovation management or commercialization. If you're not doing one on if you're not doing a project on that's bringing something to market, maybe something around dissemination or communication or outreach, but it depends on the type of project. But I think the first 2, training and project management, should be a constant, and depending on the type of project that the design of it, whether it's bringing something to market or whether it's like a policy driven project, then something that links to that will help to really accelerate the impact that you're doing in the project through that, and you have some specific goals linked to that. So you're doing the research, you're doing the work in your labs and in your organization, and maybe with some secondment work. These are like the technical work packages, and then the non-technical ones are helping you to manage and then to train you up, and then also to accelerate the impact that you're delivering through the research that you're doing in the project. So what I would do then is to go through each building block of your methodology, just highlighting this, each paragraph, and I would also do the non-technical work packages within that as well. And then what you're doing is linking in your methodology each work package that you identify, you're making reference in that work package to the work package in section 3.1. So in 3.1, which we'll go through in a little bit, is where you give an overview of work packages and your tasks and goals. And when you're describing your methodology, there should always be ongoing references or links in each of those building blocks, those paragraphs, to some of the key goals that you identify in section 3.1. Okay. Then the next section here, then you would then talk about the integration of methods and disciplines to pursue the objectives, explain how expertise and methods from different disciplines will be brought together and integrated in pursuit of your objectives. If you consider that an interdisciplinary approach is unnecessary in the context of the proposal, please provide a justification. So here you have to talk, I would have a separate section underneath talking about how highlighting integration of methods and disciplines to pursue the objectives, and then a paragraph explaining how all the different disciplines, techniques that you're bringing together, merging together, are required to deliver your objectives. And also how perhaps you're going to be trained up in these different areas as well. Then the third part to the section is on the gender. So this is now has become a very important cross-cutting part of Horizon Europe. What I would do is reference the Horizon Europe policy on gender equality, and I've put this in as a link here at the bottom, but I'd also talk a bit about or referencing any work that you do at Coimbra on gender as well. So if you have a gender department or gender policy at organizational level, please mention this and say how your project will adhere to this and how this department's policy is in line with the EC's policy, and that there will be an ongoing monitoring of the gender dimension and the diversity aspects of your project throughout. And then the final part to section 1.2, which is open science and research data practices. So here you need to, if you're dealing with data, you have to highlight how you're going to comply with the rules set by the EU on this. So there's a new policy called, relatively new legal requirement called, I'm sure many of you know about, which is called GDPR. It's really important to reference this and say that you're aware of GDPR, that your organization has a GDPR compliance system, and that your project will which is in line with the EU's policy, and you should say how your project will comply with this. So sections 3, gender here and open science, these only have to be like small paragraphs. The bulk of the text, you'll probably be looking your methodology, the overall methodology where you explain the work packages. This is probably really going to be about 2 pages. The integration of methods and disciplines to pursue the objectives is probably going to be nearly half a page, and then 2 short paragraphs on the gender dimension and open science research data practices. Okay, does anyone have any questions on this?
Yes, Michael, we have a question about interdisciplinarity. That what is interdisciplinarity, and is there any official definition for that? And for instance, chemistry and physics are interdisciplinary or not?
No, I'd see them as multidisciplinary. So if interdisciplinary is when you're going into your own discipline, but into a different area of that, but multidisciplinary is when you're going to completely different disciplines, and both of these are fine. Just learning new skills, new areas of research, new techniques. It's all of these are good things, but you should be highlighting these. If you're going to be just doing the same research in the same department, not really learning any new skills, then this isn't going to get you the marks that you need. And if you're going to be like working with a supervisor who is in a completely different area of research or subsection area that is providing access to different networks and different skills, then you should really make this very evident and highlight this, and this will get you the marks that you need. Okay, so interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary is fine. Across different sectors, there isn't like one's better than the other. Just any of these things that you can play on and highlight in the proposal will get you the marks that you need here. Is there any other questions?
I think we have another question from Olga. Yes, Olga.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask whether supervision was also evaluated, and whether, if we were talking about this hypothetical situation of a social scientist being supervised by a computer scientist, so what would be preferable then to have as a supervisor? A computer scientist supervising the social scientist, or social scientist supervising another social scientist, but with some computer scientist links to and dialogue? Thank you.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and this is a really tricky point to get right all the time, because some evaluators will look at some proposals and say, this is a risk. Why have we got people with completely two different disciplines working with each other?
Indeed, yeah.
How can they really understand each other's needs, and how can the supervisor support the applicant as is outlaid in the proposal? The key word to use here is complementarity. So you have to show how your background as an applicant and your desires going forward are complementary to the supervisor, and they're linked. If it shows that there's a complete disconnect and there's no linkages, then this is going to be at risk of being pulled up by the evaluator as saying, actually, there's no synergy here. There's a risk. And this has been done many times through a number of evaluations. So you have to show that there is complementarity. So it is quite a sensitive thing to do, because on the one hand, you want to show that there is a jump being made from one discipline to another, and that there's training and acceleration of career development from one discipline to another. But there is also a potential risk that if you don't show that there is linkages and complementarity, that the evaluators will say, actually, they will not understand each other's needs, and there'll be a lack of supervision.
So let me see, Michael, if I understand you correctly. So it would probably be ideal to refer in the actual training element, training work package, a dialogue, possible dialogue, or probably regular meetings with a person from another disciplinary area.
Yes, that's good. And also in the next section, which is sections 1.3, where you talk about the training and the supervision, it's in this section where you talk about why have you picked the supervisor? Ultimately, if you think about MarieCurie, it's international mobility, and ideally from the commission side, they're saying why you're picking the best supervisor and the best organization in Europe. Why is this person the best for you as a fellow? And you have to make that case in section 1.3.
Right.
And if you do that well, then there should be no risk around this. But I agree, like when you have two completely different disciplines, there is a bit of a risk around that. But section 1.3, which I'll go through in a moment, will hopefully, if you do that in a convincing way, it will address that appropriately.
Thank you.
Okay. Is there any other questions on this section?
Yeah, we have another one, that is transdisciplinarity also valued or not?
Yes, definitely. Transdisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, sectoral, any form of development beyond the existing discipline of the researcher is a benefit for sure. Okay, so methodology. So just to dig a little bit deeper into what I was talking through here. So just to summarize really. So your methodology in designing clear work packages, your methodology and work packages should be around about 2.5 pages long. I would say 1.5 to 2 pages writing out your methodology. When you're doing that, when you're writing out your each paragraph for each of your work packages, I would make references to how each of those work packages link to your objectives in section 1.1. So make sure that there's always a constant linkage between section 1.1, 1.2, where you're highlighting your methodology, and also 3.1, which will be your tasks, your work plan. So you don't just in brackets, work package 1, this is also in bracket OBJ, objective X, and then work package 2 in brackets OBJ, X. So there's always a clear link to each work package back to the overall objectives, the end goals of your project. And yeah, as I mentioned, suggest having around 4 to 6 work packages where 4 or 5 are technical, or 1 to 2 work packages are non-technical. But I would say training and project management really should be a constant in my view, and then having an additional work package in there. So it's probably 2 or 3 work packages as non-technical. You'd have an additional work package in there linked to impact. So you have project management in there, training in there as a work package, and then some form of impact work package. So it's either something around innovation management or exploitation, or something linked to dissemination or outreach or engagement, depending on the type of project. So this is just to highlight a bit more information on gender. So gender, as I said, is important. This is the link here that I've mentioned. If any of you would like some text on how to address this, because this can sometimes be a bit fiddly for people, then please let me know, and I'll be happy to share with you some examples of how this has been addressed in previously funded proposals. Okay, so moving on to section 1.3. So this is basically all about the training that the fellow will receive and the supervision. So this section should be around about 1.5 pages long. And here you talk about the two-way interaction. So what this is basically the transfer of knowledge between the researcher and the host and the partner organizations as well. So the research project makes up the focus of the fellowship, but should be framed in the context of training for the researcher. So what you need to do in this section is to demonstrate a clear programming of supervision. What are you looking for from your supervisor, and how will this be delivered? So you need to give an overview of who the supervisor will be, why they've been selected, why basically are they the best, ideally the best person in Europe for your project. So remember, these are international mobility grants, so you're ideally picking the best organization and person in Europe to complement your work. So you need to make that convincing. I know sometimes people apply for different reasons, like they may want to be in Coimbra, or they may have colleagues already in Coimbra, or whatever that reason may be. But from a MarieCurie perspective, you have to make it so that the supervisor and the organization is framed so that this is the best place and person to host you in Europe. So just to dig a bit deeper into how you do this at the beginning, so talk a bit about the qualifications and experience of your supervisor. Include evidence that the supervisor is suitably qualified. Do they have any publications, patents, international collaborations? Do they have any postdocs? All that kind of stuff. Then if other colleagues will provide mentoring, please describe it. Please also include measures to ensure the successful integration of the fellow and transfer of knowledge. So talk about why, beyond also the supervision that you will receive, why this organization is best for your project. So what other types of value adds are going to be provided? Will it be access to a particular type of facility? Will it be access to a particular type of network? Is this department the best in Europe at doing certain types of work which are aligned to your research project? So these sorts of things you should also integrate around the supervision to show that actually it's not just a supervisor, but it's also the host as well. And then something you should mention here, which is an important point to highlight, is that you will be required when you start your project to, as an early stage deliverable, to produce something called a career development plan. And I would mention here that you've started to develop a career development plan already with your supervisor, because this will be required as an early stage deliverable in the project, but it's also good to show that you're already thinking about how your training needs are going to be met, even at this stage, even at sort of the pre-award stage. Also, the transfer of knowledge from the host to the researcher, and from the researcher to the host. Please try and make this as customized as possible. You know, what sort of knowledge, networks and contacts are being transferred each way. You know, if you're going to Coimbra? Why are you? What other things at the organisation can you tap into beyond the supervisor and beyond the department? Is there an entrepreneurial department? Is there a technology transfer office? What other skills do you want to learn that complement the work that you're doing that Coimbra offer broadly across the organisation? Do they do any outreach or events that you can tap into to showcase your work? Do Coimbra have any links to businesses or other regional networks where you can tap into to showcase your work? What sort of work is being done around the facilitation network that's provided at Coimbra, and how can you say, oh, this is going to be used to help me refine my proposal writing skills or my presentation skills? So these are the sorts of things that you can tap into, like extracting maximum advisor level, department level, but also at the organizational level. And this section should be around about 3/4 of a page in length. So one thing that I would suggest doing when it comes to training, so the quality of the training is to put together like an overview of what this will look like, to highlight how the knowledge will be transferred from the researcher to the host, and also from the host to the researcher. So this is an example that I would use under the training section, where this is from a previously funded proposal. And what we have here is, which is a good way of showing training, which is across what I'd see is the 3 areas of needs for the fellow. So you have technical, academic training, and then a number of actions that are plans that the fellow will be doing. Then so this would be more academic, department and supervisor focused. Then cross-cutting development training. So this would be like tapping into the courses, the networks, the added value things that Coimbra bring, not just the department or the supervisor. This would come here. The cross-cutting development training you could tap into at Coimbra, and then put some action here. And then here you put like external or post-project developments of personal training and network training. So what are you going to do beyond the organization to help advance your career that you could also tap into by leveraging Coimbra as well? So are there any networks out there that you would want to connect with? Do you need to go to Brussels to showcase your work at any events? Do you need to go, it depends obviously on what the type of research that you're doing, but this should be more like outward facing, pan-European training and development. So to summarize, this is departmental, project related, supervisor related training. Here is more like organizational wide training, looking at cross-cutting areas like entrepreneurship skills, proposal writing skills, presentations, linking into networks from the organization as well. And here it's like going beyond Coimbra, maybe even going beyond Portugal. How can you tap into external networks that will help you showcase your work and accelerate your career? And this is an example of a table that I would use to showcase this. And another tip that you may want to do, depending if you're really struggling for space, which many applicants do, showcasing your work in a table can save you space as well. And this is a good way of doing so, and also being able to make it easier for the evaluator to mark, allocate scores rather than provide dense text. So just to summarize, this section needs to demonstrate a clear programming of supervision. What are you looking from the supervisor and how this will be delivered? Suggest saying that you will design a career development plan, as we've mentioned, and a data management plan as a deliverable. Okay, so final part to 1.4. So this is the quality and appropriateness of the researcher's professional experiences, competences, and skills. This should be fairly easy for applicants. So this is really just talking about yourself as an applicant, what skills you've acquired so far, what professional experience you have, and how this links in neatly to the work that you're proposing to do. Just to highlight, this section is looking backwards. So 1.4 is looking backwards to highlight your track record, your experience. You don't need to go into a huge amount of detail in this because you'll also be asked to provide a CV under part B2. And also section 2.1, which is the next section after 1.4. That first section is about, okay, how will this fellowship help you going forward? So this section is really just to highlight your track record, your experience, and how this is kind of flowing into the project that you're proposing to do. And that section should be normally about 0.5 pages. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, Michael, we have lots of questions. One of them regarding the training table that you showed, we have a question that could external and post-project development be the extra 6 months?
Yes, definitely. If you wish, it could be to do with secondments, short stays, extending the fellowship. Yeah, any of those things. It's basically working with networks beyond the organization and at national level. But if it's just a continuation of the project, like for 6 months afterwards, simply a continuation, I wouldn't see it more like that. It's more about outward facing your visibility and your connectivity beyond the organization and beyond that country. So looking for international partners, collaborative projects, looking to collaborate with networks and associations, showcasing your work at events and conferences, that kind of work.
And do we have any guidelines for career development plan structure?
No, there is an example. If you go onto the webpage of the Commission, I can send it through to you after this. If you want to put that as an action point for me, I can send you an example of what this looks like. But I wouldn't go into huge amounts of detail of that now, because that would be a deliverable if the project gets funded. But I think to highlight some links to what that would look like and things that you would normally have in a career development plan in section 1.3 would be a good thing. But I can certainly share an example of what these look like.
Okay. And is it possible to submit a career development plan at the proposal stage if it is already clear?
Not that I'm aware of. There is no need for it. It's not a requirement. You could say, excuse me, in your proposal that you have already signed off a career development plan with your supervisor. This will do no harm at all. This will help. And say, and if you have a link to it, maybe on a website somewhere, or bio website, something like that, that would be great. Or you could say this, or have a reference to it. That would be fine as well, but there's no need to include it in the application. The evaluators won't look at it at that level of detail. But to say that you have something in place already and you can substantiate that will be good.
And another one, is it possible to include some kind of mentoring structure into the supervision?
Absolutely, and you should show how that will work. It will be monthly or bi-weekly meetings, that you'll have certain targets to be met, certain goals to achieve. And I would see the career development plan and the training work package almost as one. These are two things that will be working together as one work package. And you could say throughout in section 1.3 that it's important to actually give a little bit of text around that. I plan to meet the researcher X amount of times. We will look to design some clear, key performance indicators. We strive to meet these objectives. I'll be getting some additional mentoring support from some of their other colleagues who you can reference, for example. So having some content around that within section 1.3 is advisable as well.
And the last question in the chat box, is it fine to have hyperlinks in the proposal?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, the evaluators are not compelled to click on them, but it's fine to have them on. And if you have a bio page as an applicant, so a profile page, then having that on there as well. And if you have a career development plan, or substantiations around what you're saying about what you've already achieved, like as outlined in 1.4 and also in your CV, that would also have. I wouldn't say you'd have to design one just for this application, but if you already have a bio page, then definitely reference it in there as well.
Thank you, Michael.
Okay. Okay, so any other questions on 1.4? So yeah, I've just added some additional slides on things to bear in mind. So under 1.4, you need to show here, obviously, what you've done, your professional experience, but also give the impression that you're ready to work independently, so that you're now at a stage of maturity in your research development to now be able to work as an independent fellow. And the final point here to mention, which I would advise you to all to consider, is around secondments. The Commission are quite keen not to say these are mandatory, because it's a really difficult thing to push, but I would really recommend people to try to consider doing or writing in these into the application if they can. It will only help and enhance your proposal. If any of you are looking for potential partners or some ideas around potential secondment placements that you're struggling with, then please reach out to me. I'm happy to help and advise on that. We have a big network at Crowd Helix with organisations who are always happy to be written into proposals if they're and to host fellows for this type of work. But I would definitely try and recommend doing this if you can, and it would obviously fall under section 2.1, which is around impact, but you can also mention it in section 2 as well. So the training part, which is section 1.3, this section here, I would have, if you're doing a secondment, you should mention the training that you would receive at that organisation as well. Are you going to a company or a research organisation to learn a new discipline, a new technique, to also maybe build your new networks, new contacts? Obviously depends on what the motivations are. But if anyone needs any help around secondments, then please let me know. Okay, so I'm conscious that I've been talking for 90 minutes and it's probably quite hot where we all are today. So my suggestion, if it's okay, is would it be okay, Natasha, if we maybe did the break a bit earlier and then maybe came back a bit earlier? Is that possible for people? Because otherwise we've got section, I'm going to have impact to do in that 25 minutes, which might be a bit difficult.
Yeah, is it all right for everybody? If there's somebody that really cannot make it at 12:30 Portuguese time. Okay, I'll take it that then we can have this break.
I have a train at. I'll try to make it, but I have a train at 12:36, so I might lose connection.
No problem. So should we meet back here in an hour and then we can go into impact, straight into impact, yes?
Perfect.
Yes.
Okay. And then, of course, if anyone has any separate questions in between, just feel free to share them, yeah?
Okay.
Thank you. Look forward to seeing you in an hour. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.